Yesterday marked World Hearing Day. With this day, the World Health Organization aims to promote ear and hearing care. This year's theme is Ear and Hearing Care for All. Key areas of public education include the importance of hearing protection to help prevent hearing loss, as well as the value of timely, effective intervention. Let's unpack this with Dr. Victor de Andrade, a member of the World Health Organization panel on hearing. Doc, a pleasure to have you on the program this evening. Now, people who don't have hearing loss might find it very hard to even imagine what living with hearing loss is like, and might also be shy to talk about this. How do we then seek to understand hearing loss, especially in a way to break down stigma?
Thank you very much for inviting me to be able to share some information about hearing loss, because I think for a long time hearing loss has been considered an invisible disability. It's not one that is very often seen physically, so people who are in wheelchairs or people who use a cane are a lot more visible in communities, and people with hearing loss tend to be more invisible in that way. And so there is often stigma associated with it. We even think about some of the language, the old language that was used around deafness, where people refer to people who are deaf as being deaf and dumb. And so a lot of that stigma has come from people having difficulty to understand conversation. So then people made assumptions that because there was a communication impairment, they assumed that the person may also have been cognitively challenged. There have also been challenges with people feeling excluded from society, from communication, because with hearing loss, that's one of the defining features of deafness and of hearing loss is this exclusion, where people are left out of conversations, people are left out of communication, people find it really difficult to follow what is happening because of the degree of difficulty that they're having, so then they may not participate in the same events. It may also mean exclusion from workplace, so people may find that they're not able to participate in the economy because of their hearing difficulties, or necessarily in profession that they would have originally chosen because of the difficulties with hearing. So there is a lot that has impacted on the inclusion of people with hearing loss. And so with World Hearing Day, there is an attempt to raise more awareness about hearing loss. And again, as you highlighted, the theme for this year is ear and hearing care for all. Let's make it a reality, because I think for a lot of people it hasn't been a reality. And like in our context, where there are so many competing demands and limited resources, it hasn't necessarily been a reality for all.
Speak to us a bit more about some of the misconceptions that are frequently associated with hearing loss.
Sure. So one of the big things we've mentioned already, where people assume that hearing loss equates to difficulties understanding, difficulties with cognition, and that's not the case. Similarly, one of the challenges that sometimes happens as people get older is that if people are having hearing difficulty, they may not be able to participate in the same conversations, because with background noise or multiple people speaking, they find it difficult to follow the conversation. Not because they cognitively can't, but because of the communication difficulty. And so then you'll find that they may be asking for repetition a lot of the time. They may be needing to get clarification. They may laugh inappropriately when somebody has said something serious because they've misheard something. And so, there are very many times where there's this misconception that as the person's getting older and is having a hearing difficulty, that actually they're becoming cognitively challenged. They might be showing signs of dementia, when that's not necessarily the case. And yes, it doesn't mean that there may not be some of that happening parallel, but the hearing loss may be confused for something else. In children who have hearing loss may be seen as delayed, as being slow, for lack of a better word, that we hear people describe children with hearing loss. Because I think for a long time in South Africa, we've been quite late in the identification of childhood hearing loss. And so it's often meant that children who have difficulty hearing have fallen behind at school, have maybe had delayed language and communication. And so only then later, when the hearing loss is diagnosed, does a lot of that make sense, and and parents and caregivers are saying, oh,
Right.
now that explains why my child was maybe not keeping up with peers. So a lot of that interplays around stigma and around misunderstandings of hearing loss.
So we've started discussing why this day is important to commemorate, and we've also started discussing the theme set by the World Health Organization, deciding on this theme, saying ear and hearing care for all. But beyond these, the campaign only commemorating Hearing Day, how else can we bring awareness to the deaf community?
Sure. So when we're talking about hearing loss, we're talking about a range of hearing. So deafness isn't an absolute value of all or nothing, so to speak. So it's not that somebody can hear and somebody can't hear. There are degrees of deafness. And so somebody with a mild degree of deafness may have some communication difficulty, may have some difficulty hearing conversations when there's background noise, may have some difficulty hearing multiple people speaking simultaneously. Then as the degrees move from mild, moderate, moderately severe, severe, profound, then there's increasing difficulty. And so it's necessary for us to understand that we have to be taking care of our hearing. And there are campaigns very often, for example, through the South African Association of Audiology, through the South African Speech Language Hearing Association, even, for example, at university, where there's a lot of research that's going on into deafness, into hearing loss, trying to understand the dynamics of our context, trying to understand how it interplays with our burden of disease in South Africa, where we're having to contend with major HIV, TB,
Right.
AIDS, major other health challenges that often hearing loss may not get the same amount of publicity and the same amount of attention. And so at the university, for example, and the organizations we've mentioned, we're trying to make sure that we are, through our community engagement, that we are raising that awareness.
What advice do you have to parents or even guardians of children with hearing or speech challenges? And what steps can they actively take to actually check their child's hearing?
Sure. Now, things have changed a lot in the last few years, and so we are able to get an idea of a child's hearing very early on. So historically in South Africa, we were seeing children when they were maybe starting school or just before starting school, and only then identifying the deafness. And unfortunately, the age of identification has come down. And an example is that through a newborn hearing screening program and for example, the W.H.O acoustic emissions, we were able to do a hearing screening on a newborn baby about 6 hours after being born. We can already start getting an idea of whether this child needs further referral, and we are able to start getting processes in place to see that the hearing is indeed within normal limits, or do we need to monitor this child and see what the hearing is how the hearing is developing. And so the advice that we give to parents is, if there is a concern, please don't delay, because very many times we'll hear parents say, well, in our family we were late to talk, so I just thought that maybe my child was the same. Or they say, oh, don't worry, wait until he's 3, or wait until she starts school, etc. But what it does is that may just delay processes. And so, for example, we've just completed a study actually with looking at the timing of events and what is it that determines the timing. And so people will often find that there's a trigger, there's a particular event that means, oh, hold on, I noticed this, and that was what made me. And so what parents should be looking out for is speech and language delay. Are children tugging at the ears? Is there any pus or discharge coming from the ears? Are they complaining of earache? Because there are some hearing losses which are referred to as conductive hearing losses, and they tend to be quite common in children where they may get an ear infection. And especially, for example, in the winter months with colds and flus, children are very prone to ear infections, as are adults, but children more so. So it's looking out for those signs where children are complaining about the ears. But there are also some hearing losses which are permanent hearing losses that are not due to infections or colds, etc. And those are the types of hearing losses that may need assistive technology, like hearing aids, might need some assistive technology to boost the amount of hearing that the child is getting. So if parents are concerned, have a chat with the audiologist. Admittedly, we may not have as many audiologists in areas where people are needing the services. That's one of the challenges that we've got at the moment, is that we've got very few audiologists working in the country. And there are also, as we've heard, for example, with doctors and registrars, similarly in our profession, there aren't enough posts at hospitals. The need is there, but there may not necessarily. There is also the human resource capacity, but there may not necessarily be the opportunities for the human resource capacity to be fulfilled because of limited opportunities at many of the hospitals. So where parents can, maybe make inquiries with, and that's one of the things. I was very fortunate to be one of the contributors to the Ear and Hearing Care manual that was released yesterday, that was commissioned by the World Health Organization. And so we've been working with collaborators from across the world, exactly that, focusing on primary ear and hearing care. So making sure that it's not just at a tertiary level where we're looking at services for hearing, but at primary care level, making sure that people have the access that they need.
That was Dr. Victor de Andrade, a member of the World Health Organization panel for hearing loss, of course, as the W.H.O. commemorates Hearing Day.